888-259-9231. Bunch of news I'm going to finish up getting to as well because my good friend William Lewis, who I feel like I know so well over the phone all these years, I finally met him in person. I remember back in like 1998, 99, 2000, he made an audio CD, great music, with little outtakes of myself. I think he called it Police State. And he's made a bunch of films since then, like In Plain Sight, Ripple Effect. He's made films like Washington, You're Fired, and of course, Life on the Edge of the Bubble, Blowing the American Dream, the newest film and some of his best work, available at Infowars.com, I would add. Great film to give somebody to explain to what's happening with this bubble economy and how the bankers, I love this cover. Look at how Greenspan's like this giant above the city and creating all the different types of economic bubbles. And so they control the bubble. It's like the greatest form of insider trading because they control it as it goes up and they control it as it goes down. So we're glad to be carrying this in the Infowars.com store, or folks can call 888-253-3139 to get it. And I know you guys are here to interview me about well, can you talk about what your new film is yet? You're making a concentration camp film, so we'll talk about that later. And you got some really exciting stuff you're doing. And so I'm honored to be interviewed for the film. And can we talk about your illustrious travel mate here, Gary Franchi of Restore the Republic and Lone Lantern Society, and so he's here as well. Okay, Mr. Lewis, good to have you here.
Good to be here.
Okay, tell me about this film, Life on the Edge of Der Bubble.
This is, there's so many films out there on the Federal Reserve and on money and all the various aspects of the economy. We wanted to make one that was a little bit different. We didn't want to follow that same pattern. And we wanted to show Americans that this is really nothing new at all. Starting in, like the year after we signed the Constitution, we had our first bubble. We had one in 1819, 1837, 1857, 1873, 1893.
Speculative bubbles.
Literally almost every 20 years. And yeah, they were all speculative bubbles based on some type of overuse of credit. And I mean, this is nothing new to the American economy. It's just that for whatever reason, the Federal Reserve, when it was introduced, managed to be able to allow the bubbles to grow larger and larger and larger. Instead of having a pop every 20 years and having a small bubble pop, now we've got a 75-year bubble that's popping, and it's global.
Well, exactly. I was going to expand. It was the same money changers out of England and Europe that ran these scams, that created these fiat bubbles, and the film covers that in an excellent fashion, who now are in control of the whole planet. And instead of it being limited bubbles to certain financial sectors before, and we were an agrarian society and people didn't care because it was so limited, now these bubbles are literally have the power of a tsunami of fiat money to destroy entire societies.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think many people look at it from this perspective, but we tend to want to blame the Federal Reserve and the people who issue the credit and, all the people that are kind of at the top of the bubble, shall we say. And we kind of forget that all of us participate in some degree to helping build these bubbles. Whether we're flipping houses and participating to that degree, or just taking out a bank loan so that we can, take the equity out of our home and cash it in and maybe fix up our home. I mean, all these are things that allows the bubble to grow, and it allows us as Americans to live beyond our means. In other words, if you only make $30,000 a year, shouldn't you only spend $30,000 a year? If you spend $50,000 or $60,000 a year consecutively, year after year after year, we're making a bubble.
So, like a drug dealer, they're getting us addicted and strung out to where we're totally under their control, and they made the drug, the credit, out of nothing.
Exactly, and this is one of the issues that I'd like to cover and tell people. The Federal Reserve that we have now is actually the third national bank. That's the third federal bank.
Yeah, this is an incredible history lesson. You've outdone yourself with Life on the Edge of a Bubble. I know most of the listeners understand this. Your neighbors, your friends, your family don't. You need to get this film out to everybody. Available right now at Infowars.com. William Lewis, the director, is our guest with the illustrious Gary Franchi in studio.
This is Alex.
Okay, Life on the Edge of a Bubble, Blowing the American Dream. Let's zoom in on this with Alan Greenspan on the cover. And yes, they say you can't judge a film or book by its cover. Well, you can this one. Great cover, great film. And why don't you, again, start describing the film, and we're going to put the trailer coming up in a few minutes, and then break down for people who are out there listening the point you were making about these different bubbles we've had in the past versus these new mega bubbles.
All right. Well, I mean, the easiest way for me to sum up exactly what the film is about is just to use an analogy. And that is, if you give an umpire $1,000 before he makes the play, what do you call that? You call that a bribe.
Yes.
If you give $1,000 to a judge right before he renders his verdict, what do you call that? You call it a bribe.
Not anymore. They call it, here in Texas, they openly take the money stolen from the people.
Well, I would call it a bribe, and I think most people would. And
they call it law enforcement, boy. Some kind of Al-Qaeda.
The point is that my next example here is if you give $1,000 to a politician right before he, votes on your bill, what do you call that? It's not called a bribe. They call that a campaign contribution, and I think that's what you're getting at. It's just become absolutely acceptable for the people in Washington who are trying to leech off of and persuade others to vote on their particular legislation, whoever they work for, whatever the lobby is, whatever the situation. And we cover that, we address that quite a bit in the documentary because, how can you possibly have a representative in office who truly represents the people if his campaign cost him $6.5 million on average to get reelected? You didn't contribute any of that money to his financial campaign. You can't even get in there to talk to a senator unless you've contributed.
Offshore corporations did.
Yeah, exactly. So, these are the people that are presenting us with the problem, and it's the corporations that really started out, as you see in the beginning of the film, about 200 or so years ago with Alexander Hamilton, who was our first Secretary of the Treasury. He decided that we needed to have a corporate system in the United States for the banking, and I forget exactly what they call it. It's, the corporate, what was that called? Don't get me to lie. Watch the movie. But the point is that Alexander Hamilton, our Secretary of the Treasury, the guy who appears on the $10 bill, is responsible for setting up banking corporations in the United States for the purpose of keeping all of this money that is created through the generation of credit and issuance of credit in private hands. Take all that money out of private hands. Imagine, at the peak of our bubble, we were borrowing $1 billion a day. $1 billion a day from foreign investors to feed our credit habit. All right. The money that was being made on top of the credit, the interest that's paid back, if we were to simply funnel that back into the Treasury, back into our hands, the people's hands, who it belongs to in the first place, I don't think you'd see anybody paying taxes. You surely wouldn't see a federal deficit.
No, absolutely. This fiat money, fractional reserve system, a lot of economists have argued if it was done right, would actually empower the people. The problem is it's always going to be abused. It's always going to be used. And the trade deficit alone is hundreds of billions of dollars a month now. And that's another form of fractional reserve manipulation. And that goes into the whole neo-mercantile model. But please continue.
So I think everybody gets the example there where we're talking about between a bribe and a financial contribution.
And now they've stolen trillions of dollars.
And they're going to keep doing it. And the purpose of this film is to bring all of these issues to light right now, because it is right at this moment when people can see the mask coming off of this monster that they will rise up and take action. It's not when they see their gun rights disappearing. It's not when they see their First Amendment rights disappearing. It's when they're affected by money, their pocketbooks. All right, so I think that this is a perfect opportunity for us to jump in there and get people motivated to take some action to make these changes that we're talking about.
Well, that's what Ron Paul keeps saying, and what I keep saying is that the bankers are going to use the crisis they've engineered on record to bring in even more power and control for themselves, as they're doing right now. So we are forced to point out they're the architects of all of this and hopefully use the crisis to kick them out of power instead of them getting more power. It's not like they're just going to get away with this. They are going for broke now because they know they've committed so many crimes already that this has got to be the mother of all corruptions. And so there's nothing they won't do. They are committed to their cause. They have pledged their names, their honor, their money, their treasure, their blood, their sweat, their souls on this.
Their lack of honor. Absolutely.
And then meanwhile, the public's drinking beer, still watching the football game, having no idea what we're in the clutches of and thinking, politicians are trying to fix it, Marge. No, they're not trying to fix it. They are